Hello and welcome to another episode of the Madman and Mel podcast. If you're new here, my name is Mel and I live on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland on a small holding. This is a podcast primarily knitting, but with a few other crafts thrown in whenever I've done them, basically. If you're a regular viewer, then welcome back, and let's hope this one's a bit shorter than usual. So I've been on quite the knitting buzz lately. Sometimes over the winter months I completely lost my knitting mojo, but it's completely back now, I have to say. And if you watch the previous part 1 and 2 of the previous episode, you can see just how much I've been getting up to. So let's first of all talk about my first finished object, which obviously I'm wearing. And it of course is my Boyagi sweater. I had this mostly finished last time. I think I had I'd started one of the sleeves. I don't think I'd started the second one, and I'm really happy with it after I had to make some adjustments to it. I started knitting this back last last June I believe, and I was a bit larger than I am now. So when I was finishing up the body on this a few weeks ago, it was just didn't fit right, didn't hang nice, so I had to do a bit of surgery to this, and I spoke a bit more about this in my previous episode. But basically what I did was I took out the before I picked up for the button band, I seamed up the sides because it's knit in the round, and cut a big chunk out of each side. So first of all, as I've said, this is a Boyagi sweater, and I will insert some photos somewhere where you can see it better, although I will stand up and show you. There we go. As you can see, it's fitting really nice in the back, which it didn't before I did these side seams. I've changed the ribbing on most of it. I've done a 2x2 rib on the bottom and on the sleeves, and I've made these 3/4 length sleeves, and I will show you a picture of the original pattern, but it came full length with a very large cuff on them, which just won't work for me. I'm forever pulling my sleeves up. So I've made 3/4 sleeves, and this, I don't know if this is going to focus, there we go. It's got this really nice little cable pattern all over the body, which took forever. And then we've got colour work and a big lace panel and more colour work at the top, and it is worked top down. So the yoke worked up really quickly. The yarns I've used were both my hand dyed yarns actually. This one is Nephrite Jade and this one is Pumpkin Picking. I can't even remember my own colourways half the time. And I've knit this on a BFL nylon base. The original pattern is by Caitlin Hunter, and you can see it just there. And as you can see, I'll try and get this to focus, the sleeves are full length, and like I said, it has these long cuffs, but that just wasn't going to work for me. So yes, I'm really happy with it. I haven't yet, but I need to stitch in some bias tape where I've seen that seamed at the sides, because I've cut my actual knitting, which was quite scary. It's kind of like doing a steek, but because I hadn't allowed for it, I was just a little bit wary about it, but it's worked out fine. But I still need to place some binding tape or ribbon. I think I'll use buyer's binding tape over those cut ends of the steek. So yes, really happy with it. I used I'm trying to remember what size needle I used for this. I shall have it written down, so bear with me. I used a 3.5mm needle, and I had a 23.5 stitch gauge across that, and I counted for that, and it worked out really well, and really happy with it. I have to remember to look at the camera lens. I'm using a different camera. I got a new toy, so I have to look here and not here, which I used to on my phone. I used to look at the camera over here and not at the screen, but now my screen's up here and my lens is down here, and it's getting very confusing, so I do apologise for that. I will get used to it. So my second UFO, no, not even UFO, my second finished object, I have 4 finished objects actually. So my second one is a cowl, and this one is done in my own hand spun yarn. I spun this yarn up during last year's Tour de Fleece, which, if you're not a spinner, is an annual event which takes place during the Tour de France, which obviously hasn't took place this year, but usually it takes place, and the idea is that you spin yarn, or spin on your spinning wheel or spindle, whatever your tool of spinning is, for the days that the Tour de France is taking place, and it's just a bit of fun. And this last year I did this hand spun, and this hand spun is made with fibre from Created by LCB, and the colourway is Christmas Time, and as you can see it's very Christmassy colours, and we've got the greens and reds and some peppermint blue in there and such like, but it's not overtly Christmassy, so it's not in your face, oh my god this is a Christmas cowl. It definitely isn't. I can wear this whenever, but it just means it's extra special, extra good to wear it around Christmas time. So I've just knit this, I kind of made it up as I went along. I've done bands of garter and bands of stockinette, and the stockinette sections are slightly wider in the centre, mostly because I lost count of my rows and had to do that, and then they narrow down again when they get to the other, to the cast, which is the caster, which is the cast on, whichever one is which. But yes, I'm really happy with it. It's spun with, let me try and remember, it's, you have to excuse my pronunciation because I am not American if you are, but it's targi, a mixture of targi, silk and bamboo, and it's squishy, very squishy, because targi, like rambouillet, is squishy, and it's got a lovely feel. It's quite marshmallowy. When you're spinning things like rambouillet, it feels very, it's like spinning sponge, which is really strange. I can show you an example of that actually. Okay, here I have some fibre ready to be spun. I've already kind of stripped it into thin strips, so let me see if I can get this to focus without my face in it, which it probably won't. Focus. Right, okay, there we go. It's quite, you can't really see between the fibres. It's quite, it just looks like a bath sponge to me. It's very spongy. And when you are spinning with it, it's got that kind of, I don't know, it doesn't look like pieces of hair like fleece would normally. It's like candy floss or something like that. And targi is the same as the way rambouillet is. That is actually 100% rambouillet. So that is my second finished object. Very simple. I just kind of, this is my, I could pick it up and go whilst watching TV and not have to think about it. I didn't have to follow a pattern or keep a check on a chart. So this was my, I want to watch TV and I don't want to concentrate on my knitting. Yeah. Second finished object. So my third finished object is a pair of socks, and I don't think I'd started these last time I podcasted. They worked up really fast. These are done in a mixture of yarns. The toes and the heels and the cuffs are in my own yarns. That's in a BFL nylon in the colourway Slate, which is this blue-grey there. And the body of the sock is a commercial sock yarn. I do like a good commercial sock yarn. This is an okay commercial sock yarn. I've definitely had better. It is, well, look in my little project bag. It is, I'm going to focus, anytime now. It is Sudor Soul to Soul, sometimes called Heart and Soul as well, and it is in the colourway Pigeon Toes. And these are for my husband. They're quite large, and these were something new for me. They're my usual vanilla 2-up sock, which I link to everything in my Ravelry pages, I will try and find the patterns elsewhere if they are elsewhere and link to them if you can't currently use Ravelry as well. But I usually knit my socks on a 2.25mm needle for fingering weight socks. These are for my husband, like I said, and I knit these slightly different. Normally I would knit magic loop, and I did do magic loop for parts of this, for the toe, which is a Turkish cast on, for the heel flap, and when I came to do the rib as well. But the body of the sock I actually knit with my new I would say 9-inch, but I think they're actually a 10-inch circular needle. If I show you, which way around are we? If I show you those, these are a very tiddly needle with very tiddly needle tips. I usually knit on the Knit Pro, I think it's called, what's it in America? It's not Knit Pro, then it'll come back to me, but they are the Knit Pro birch laminate needles. Show, it'll work. There we go. And these rainbow ones. So I bought the short version in these as well, and these took some getting used to. If I show you the first sock, the fabric is not great up to probably where I started for the gusset. My stitches on this area where I first started are very, very uneven. There's big bits where there's gaps, and just very uneven stitches. It took me a little bit of getting used to, but by the time I had reached the top of the sock, it's much better. I can be a bit of a loose knitter anyway, so sometimes my gauge is not perfect, but it's pretty good. As you can see on the foot of the second sock, it pretty much looks like my socks normally do. I don't worry about perfectionism on socks, that's for certain. So really pleased with those. This particular ball of the commercial sock yarn was a lot better than the previous one I'd used, which I think was on my previous podcast, which was the same brand, the same yarn line as this one, but it was in a different colourway, and it was not very good quality. It had thin spots and lots of joins. This has had a couple of joins in as well, but nothing that worried me too much. There is a strange splice on one of the socks, but I had to kind of tie it tighter manually. But other than that, this one was definitely a lot better. I've used 48 grams on the body of this for my husband because he's got quite big feet, and I have obviously 52 grams left, so I can get at least one pair of socks either for him, or one, maybe eke out 2 pairs of socks for myself with contrasting toes and heels as well. So that's the third finished object. Now my final finished object I might be struggling to get in shot because it is huge. It is, and I'm not sure if I want to try putting it on because it is very big and heavy and very warm. It's this really big crochet cardigan. I try this on. I don't know if it'll go over the top of my side, but we shall try it. It might bunch up around the upper arm. It's very chunky and very warm, and it's going to sit strange. If I stand up, as you can see, it kind of comes in at the bust. I've yet to fasten on the button, and I will show you which one I'm going to use. The shaping fits really nice at my waist here. I have quite a sway to my back and it fits really nicely, as you can see at the sides here as well. And it is done in a ripple crochet pattern. It's called the Lazy Wheels Crochet Cardigan, and it is in a book called Loop to Loop Crochet, which I forgot to bring with me. But I will link to it. Let me take this off. It is very warm with it. But the other day, Orkney summers are strange. You would think they'd be warm, and sometimes they are, It rarely gets above 20 degrees Celsius here, which, what's that Fahrenheit? Double it and add 30, so 40, 70, around about 70, rare to get above that. But also we get some really cold days. So the other day I got very, very cold and quite chilled through. So I had to actually put this huge, heavy winter cardigan on in the house. That's how cold it gets. I do have a button set aside for this sweater, and it is a vintage button. And will it focus? Will it not? Yeah. I have no idea what it's supposed to be. It's very unusual. It's from my granny's vintage button tin, which I tried to use from there if possible, otherwise I will use ones that I bought, but I do like to use them. And there was just the one of them. It can't, my husband John says it looks like a computer chip. Me, I think it looks kind of like a 1920s door, you know, like a glass panel door. It kind of reminds me of that. I still have to sew that on. I have a few sewing things to do, actually, little bits. I have the button to sew on that. I have the bias tape to sew on this. I have the ribbon to sew on my caramel cardigan, my gnarled oak cardigan, which I showed on part 1 of the previous episode. Yeah, I haven't done that yet. And I also have the ribbon to sew on the steek of my cardigan, which I'll be showing you just next, which isn't finished. The sleeves are still to be knitted, but I have steeked already, so I have that ribbon to sew as well. I have a lot of sewing jobs to do. I should probably get on with that. Okay, so that's all the finished objects, thankfully. Just before this time, we have only 2 whips. I have other ones that are kind of on the back burner, but I haven't been actively working on, so they're not really whips really, are they? Kind of UFOs. Or I haven't started. I've got lots of projects put together ready to get on with, just haven't done it yet. But I do have 2 that I'm actively working on. So let's start with the first one. Okay, so my first whip, I'm going to try and not drop off the needles, because I am knitting a sleeve and it's on a short needle. So I've been working on my Ichabod cardigan, and I think last time I recorded I'd only done the bottom button band. I don't even think I'd knitted the pockets. So I've been flying along with this, and I haven't even worked on it in the last week because I've been away at my mum's, which I can tell you about shortly. And I've already knit almost the entire cardigan. Let me try and hold this up. I'm going to struggle though. As you can see, I've knit the entire body of the cardigan. I've even done the button band, which I'm not 100% happy with, and I'm already on to the first sleeve. This is the Ichabod Cardigan by Andy Satterland, and I said that wrong last time. But if I get you the pattern, I can show you a picture of the finished design. It's in black and white, unfortunately. I will see if I can find a different picture inside. But it is this cardigan here, Ichabod Cardigan, and as you can see, it's quite a, what I would call a grandad style cardigan, with the v-neck around here, almost like a sweetheart neckline. Not a sweetheart, but it's got that kind of shape to it. It's not quite a v-neck, it's slightly rounded, and then it's got lines that run the front and the side and the back of the cardigan, reminiscent of the ribs of a pumpkin, which is why it's called the Ichabod Cardigan. I don't think I have another picture on this pattern, no. So I've knit this. Oh, I forgot to mention that was knit from my old drop stash. That's Eskimo in dark brown, and this is another Eskimo, not another Eskimo, another drops yarn from my old stash, which is drops alpaca. And I've held this double because it is a sport weight, but I've held it double to make more of a worsted to Aran weight, probably an Aran weight. As you can see, I've got these ribs that run down the cardigan. They run all the way from the top, all the way down the front. Remind me of princess seams if you're sewing a dress or a garment. It's got these pockets at the bottom here with a garter design triangle on the front, and again with the ribs, and it has those under the arm. I'm going to be jiggling this around everywhere. Under the arm and the back of the cardigan, down the sides and down the centre, like a pumpkin. So when you're wearing it and it fits the shape of your body, it's kind of got those almost like seams in a garment, in like a dress. The sleeves are done with a sleeve cap, a short row sleeve cap, and again with these ribs down the top, and there is one that runs down the underneath too. And this cardigan is really cleverly constructed. It's a bottom up cardigan. You knit the button band first, then you knit the back of the pockets back there, and then you knit all the way around and picking up the stitches off the back of the pocket as you go, so you get the pockets knit at the same time. Very clever. I will definitely want to do that again. The front, it's supposed to be knit flat. I did not do that. I knit it in the round, which is probably why it's flying along so quickly. I actually steeked this. I knit it in the round all the way up to the top, and then it looked a funky shape whilst it was being knit, and then I steeked it and opened it up, and I added this button band. This button band, I went down the needle size for this button band, and I'm not convinced I've made it big enough. I mean, it's quite, I don't know if it's gonna show it. It's quite narrow. I would say it's maybe an inch. It'll block out to an inch. I'm hoping that's big enough because the buttons I've got to use on this are fairly small. I plan on using these little wee black buttons, kind of reminiscent of like pumpkin eyes, such like. They're kind of a matte, almost a matte black, more of a satin black, and again Granny's button tail. And because they're so small, I didn't want to make too wide a button band, so I've kept it fairly narrow. I'm hoping it's going to block out because it feels a bit, I don't know, not a bit stiff maybe. But I didn't want to make it too big because the buttons are so small. As you can see where I've steeked on the back, and I have got a steeking video somewhere on my channel, and I will be covering that with some ribbon that I bought especially to go with it. And I got this on Etsy, and it is a taupey colour. It's slightly darker than it's showing on screen. It's kind of, yeah, maybe it's about that. And this kind of burnt orange, which I think is going to look really nice with this. That's more the colour. You can see it's more of a taupey colour rather than a cream. So I don't have a lot to do on this. I have obviously the sleeves to do. I'm about to drop all the stitches off because this yarn's quite slippery. I'm knitting the sleeve on short tips. These are, what size are these? 4.5mm. My 4.5mm liquid needles, and these are on the little wee tips. I used the same needles for the body of the sweater and just went down a needle size for the rib. So hopefully when I record next, this should be finished. And I love, this is, I've never knit with 100% alpaca before. I had this in my stash. I was going to knit something else with it, and then I saw this pattern. And I have some more in like a blackberry colour, which I'm planning on another sweater. But it's really nice held double. I'm hoping it's not going to drape too much. I want a little bit of a drape when I block it out, but not too much, so we shall see. But if it does, it just does. It's very soft. It doesn't feel prickly to me, which is good because I have a princess neck. And yep, and I even got a pumpkin progress keeper. My Lily of Nordic Stitches when she was still doing stitch markers, which she's not now, but little wee pumpkin. So yeah, it's not like I look forward to autumn or anything. It's not as if I've got 2 pairs of autumn Halloween socks planned to knit very soon. Or I have 2 kind of Halloweeny sweaters planned too. I'll tell you about those. I like Halloween. Okay, my second whip is a shawl I showed last time on the podcast. I have only knit a wee bit on this since I last showed it, but I have got onto the next section so you can see what I'm doing. It is this shawl here, which is the Boyagi Shawl, and this is by Knit Boop. And I have started the lace panel now. I hadn't started the lace at all last time. I think I had finished, but I'm not entirely sure whether I'd finished this section. I know I was doing this section. That looks like it's got a line of blue running through it. Just there. Huh. It doesn't. It's just the way the colours are looking on camera. Ah, funny. So this is knit in 2 yarns by Olan. Let's see if I've got the button bands to hand. Probably not, because I am that professional. I haven't, but I do have the cakes of yarn. That's these 2 yarns. These are by Olan, and I bought these when I was at Perth Yarn Festival last year, and it is a company based in Ireland, and I believe they just bought their own mill, and they're just starting to mill up their own yarns, which is brilliant. These are in the colourway Kiln, which is that one, which is like a I don't know, it's a bit more orange than it's showing on camera. It's kind of like a pale bricky orange with green in it. And this one, which is a green that I cannot remember the name of, but I will try and remember and put it on the screen. So I'm knitting this on a 4mm needle for the main part of the shawl and a 375 for the lace, and the lace is looking really pretty. Really pleased with it. This is one of my stitch markers here with a little wee spinning wheel on it. I originally started knitting this on 2 other yarns, but this, I'm really pleased I swapped to this. It's got a garter section and then a mosaic section, then a lace panel, and then it will have another section of mosaic and another section of garter. And I'm trying to remember if it's in the same colour. Here's the pattern. Yes, the pattern, sure, as you can see, it starts out with 1 colour, moves into the 2 colours, the lace is in the 2nd colour, both colours for the mosaic, and back to the 1st colour here. But when I get to this end, whatever yarn I've got left over of this colour, I'm going to carry on knitting in garter. I might do some stripes of garter between the 2 panels, but this is by Knit Boop and it's a Boyagi Shawl, which is this one here. I haven't worked on this as much as the other project, mostly because it's at the thinky bit where the lace is, but I did take time to do some knitting on this whilst I was on the ferry travelling to and from my mum's, which again I will talk about in a moment. So that's all the knitting bits. I have 1 or 2 acquisitions, not many because I've got a ridiculous large stash, and a few other bitsy bits. So, first acquisition. I've been getting a couple of yarns which I've wanted to try for a while. Isolde Teague has had a sale on in her shop, or she is throughout all of July, it's still on, and each week is different yarns in the sale. So this past week I got 2 skeins of pronunciation plain yarn by Hillersvåg, and it is in the colourway Listbrunn, which is light brown, I believe. It is in Norwegian pelt wool and it's of a chunky weight. Yeah, it's definitely a chunky weight. And I plan on probably making something for my husband in these. Or maybe a hat. Each we can have matching hats. Colourwork hats. Might do that. Or just hats. Yeah. So I got 2 skeins of those. And last week in Isolde's sale I bought 2 rolls of the Gilead yarn by by something in French. Anyway, it is a woolen spun merino wool, and this is quite blowing out. It's quite bright. It's kind of, let me see if I can get it right. It's a burnt orange. It's not neon orange. It is about that. It's kind of a burnt pumpkin orange with, and it's quite heathered. It's got so I can get it to focus. It's quite heathered. It's not showing up very well, but it's got these dark flecks through it as well. And I also bought a skein of the grey. It's like a mid-grey. Not sure what I'm going to make with them yet. I might use them together for some colour work. That could be nice. Or I could make a hat that matches my cardi, but that might be a bit much. I could wear a pumpkin hat, but probably not. I'm considering a cable hat as well with the grey, which I think would look really nice. Something like Angela Mari does a couple of really nice chunky cable hats, or at least one chunky cable hat that has been in my queue for quite a while, so that would look really nice in the orange or the grey, so can't decide. But I got one of each of those two colours, mostly because I wanted to try these yarns and I wanted to make sure I just had enough for a couple of small items, and that would give me an idea what the yarn, the feel of the yarn, how it works up for future projects. So I believe that's all of the yarny things I have to hand. I said earlier I was planning on doing a couple of Halloweeny kind of themed sweaters. I've been swatching the colourwork and gauge for a couple of sweaters. One of them is the Arachne Sweater, and it has a kind of a colourwork yoke, but it's not a lot of colourwork in it. It has a spiderweb design in the yoke, and it is another design by Andy Satterlund. I like a lot of her designs actually. She usually does quite vintage style ones. These were ones that she did that are more Halloweeny. So anyway, it's got this spider web radiating out around the yoke, and I'm planning on doing that in a kind of a mid-grey with a white or off-white spider webs. And the other one is called the Witching Hour, and the name of the design eludes me right now, but I'll pop it up on the screen here. And it is a swan show. Now, I don't do swan shows because I don't just sit at a desk and type and have to keep my arms down here. I like to be able to move my arms because I need to be able to do, like, wave my arms around and feed chickens and cook dinner and such like. So swan shows just do not work for me. But this particular design is done on a DK weight yarn. So my plan is to slightly adapt it, do a fingering weight sweater, kind of like my spike here, but using the yoke design from it. And the yoke has, it's called the Witching Hour, and it has bird skulls, which sounds really weird, but you don't really realise the bird skulls at first glance. It just looks really, really, really different. So it's got these bird skulls all the way around and other bits of design in between them. And the idea of knitting it on a fingering weight yarn on a tighter gauge is the yoke, instead of being really deep, will make it shorter and smaller. So I'll have to knit a larger size to get the width, but the yoke will be shallower, and then I can separate for the arms and sleeves at a different rate and make it into a sweater, probably using a very similar stitch count to when I've made my spike, because I know how this one fits. And that's the plan, and I'm planning on doing that in a really, really dark midnight purple and a like an off-white background, and the skulls will be done in the dark purple as well. So it's not like I like Halloween and like autumn or anything, and can't wait for it, although it kind of feels like we're already there in some ways. I mentioned that I was going over the water to visit my mum, who lives on the Scottish mainland, which is what I did. I spent a few days over there getting loads of tasks and stuff done that she needed help with, mostly things like putting up big bookcases and things like that. And yeah, so I spent some of that time on the boat knitting this shawl, because I could, rather than knitting something mindlessly and kind of staring out the window, when you've been on the boat a couple of times, catching the ferry, it's kind of like sitting on a bus for an hour or an hour and a half. it loses its novelty unless you see wheels or things out the window. It kind of loses its novelty. So just sitting there knitting on a sock, I think I would find it quite boring. So knitting on something that you have to concentrate on more means the time passes quicker. And on the boat with nobody else sitting with me, social distancing, I don't have to speak to anybody, got a mask on, we're fine. So that's how I've managed to get on with the lace section. I should be able to do some of the lace section in front of the TV, as long as we're not watching something I'm completely engrossed in. But I would like to get the sweater done first, and plus I have 100 things I want to work on constantly. The shawl isn't the top of my priority, although I would like to get the lace section out of the way, because then I can just kind of almost mindlessly knit on the rest. So I think that's about it for this episode. I'm hoping it's not going to be too long. I'll try and make sure it's not too long, and I'll have another podcast very soon hopefully, and I will try and remember to look at the lens and not over here. There's nothing over here. There's nothing. The screen's up here. I'm not even looking at the screen. Just keep looking at the, I don't know, the button. Why? I don't know. Yep, so hope you're all keeping well, and you know, keeping your chin up in the times that we're having at the moment, and hopefully I will see you very, very soon. Okay, bye bye. It is from my granny's vintage button. It is